Hello there, Bhavam. So we can see Bhavam all the way from the USA. So Bhavam, what I'd like you to do is just tell us a bit about yourself, and then when you're ready, feel free to share your screen.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here, excited to see so many folks from all around the world. Uh, my name is Bhuvan. I've been in IT for like a good 25 plus years, and I've been worked in like a lot of things. And lately, I've been working as a solution architect and defining primarily in the financial services space, like automating several things. Came across Power Automate recently. It's been a fantastic tool, and I've been working. I love this tool, and I've been working on this. Delivered several solutions to several clients. All of them are happy, and that's kind of my introduction. Today, Dallas is shut down because of the freezing rain. It's good that this is a virtual event.
Well, thank you, Bhavan, for joining us at such an early time in Dallas. So if you could share your screen, please.
Yes.
And whilst Bhavan shares his screen, just an introduction to Kira. Thank you, Kira, as well. Kira's been working hard with the whole administration and marketing. So Kira will be there to support if there's any problems. There you go. So Bhavan, we can see your screen now. We are 5 minutes in. You do have the whole hour, and you will also have obviously 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A as well, if time permits, because we will be beginning the next session on the hour. So I've stolen 5 minutes from you all already, Bhavan. So without further ado, Bhavan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Raz. Hello, everyone again. So today we are going to, I'm going to introduce to run with, walk you through an experience which we have gone through, from one of our clients. This was an actual implementation. Obviously, I'm going to anonymize a lot of data here. Sorry. So about me, I work for Invati, and you can reach me out here, after this conference call, if you need anything. So our goal is to present, walk you through a interesting case study, where we were expecting to automate a help desk, not so much to provide as a support, but to get the visibility into what they were doing, what each of the folks are doing, and how much, how many people are working and how many people are not working. Because with the remote, the pandemic has given us an opportunity to work from home, but also possess presented with a lot of challenges. So challenges primarily when you are in office, everybody who is busy and who is not. But now everybody is remote, and managers or the management want to know that who is, how much they are loaded with. You don't want to overload some people, they are working harder than they are needed to, and some people doesn't need to, are not even getting any of the workload. So that was kind of the basic premise behind what we were assigned to tasks with. So so I walk you through how we took the approach. So, and at the end, you will have option to ask the questions as Raz mentioned. Now, I'm assuming you can see my screen, right? Now switching the screens, right? Okay. So here, when I'm referring to as a financial services companies, or we are looking at asset management, hedge funds, private equity, VC firms, direct lending. These are the companies. But in US, nowadays, even banks are offering a lot more complex products, and you need to have a direct relationship manager who understands all these products. But at the same, and regular help desk won't cut it. So the customers, who are generally the high net worth individuals, was spending investing a lot of money into those organizations, financial institutions, for them to further invest into other investment products. They are not going to call customer service. So you are generally calling, expected to reach out to somebody at the personal level. So that's one of the complexities in these financial organizations. And also, these organizations are generally small. We're talking about a $4 billion hedge fund will run with about a 20 people staff. And that's an important differentiation between large organizations and the small organizations. And this implementation was for a asset management firm. They have in total of about 40 people, out of them 20 people in finance alone. So, and all of them are remote, and you can only imagine what they are going through. Getting visibility into how much each of them are working was kind of the challenge there. Now, the unique thing about these financial organizations is they deal with millions of dollars, but at the same time, they are small and they don't have a structured help desk. And it's not even feasible, to have a frontline, level 1 support. In that case, emails are generally come to a shared mailbox. That was kind of the expectation from their customers, who are also referred to as investors. But generally, they a lot of times, investors or the customers, they are sending these emails to the personal mailboxes too. That is another challenge, which we needed to address. And there is no way for a manager to know, how many requests are being answered, and running stats is extremely difficult. And that running stats means that also plays down into that stats is about how much each of their staff is working, right? Now, on top of it, the team's primary responsibility is not customer support. Rather, they would be working on their regulatory day jobs, which is cash management, accounting, or running these regulatory reports. And that's a lot of work. Now, I work in this industry, so I can only imagine how they are handling this on a quarter end, where they have to rush out these reports, and they're spending 16, 20 hours. And on top of it, investors or the customers are expecting a response back, and management doesn't have that visibility. Now, our goal was tasked with this, right? Understand what is the workloads on these teams, and collect stats, so that how long it's taking, when it's taking long or when it's short. So our first thought comes out is can we go with a dedicated customer service platform like Zendesk or Dynamics, or some other service desk kind of a platforms. They're good, but they require significant implementation effort. And the second, it's an additional tool which we are giving them. And that means additional tool means it's additional work for them. The last thing we want is put more work, give more work to the team members. So then we thought now we look at teams, we have planner, lists, approvals, and there's a bunch of samples Microsoft provide as in Power Apps. Okay, it's all a part of Office 365. It's good, but you don't need to buy software as well. So which one to use? That was the biggest challenge, right? We all face this, okay, we have when we are presented with a lot of options, then it gets down into okay, which one should I use? Everyone has its advantages and also downsides. Now we looked at the licenses, right? This is always the question we get in the Power Apps side is what is free and not? And that led to, okay, this is enough to handle, not to buy additional licenses. So it's a 6K. Okay, this sounds like a good option. Can we build workflows behind and use one of the tools in Teams? And then it comes down to okay, when defining what tool to use, right? So these are the four things which comes into play is okay, all these tools, although they're part of Teams, there seems to be a little bit of disconnected. And one of the fundamental requirements of a help desk tool is like, you don't want to go in two places and try to keep them in sync, right? So you want, in a traditional help desk tool like a Zendesk or a Dynamics, benefit is you get to respond to those emails from their customer support mailbox or like their customer support tool. None of the tools in Teams actually allows you to do that. And on top of that, we don't have a clear guidance provided by Microsoft that which one to use under what circumstances. So those are the challenges, like, we were going through, like, in all the discussions we had. Then it comes down to how to make them work, right? Choose a tool and how to make them work and provide a seamless experience. Obviously, that's the ultimate goal. Then we log down to, like, planner. The one simple reason we set out on the planner part is interface. Interface makes a lot of difference, and that's it's pretty much like in everything. It has a nice Trello boards, like a drag and drop interface, nice interface to, like, present, like, present it in, like, in either the buckets or by users, due dates. There's a lot of filters and rearrangement options. We couldn't get anything better than that. Even with if you go for the tools like Monday, it's the same interface. Here, the only benefit is you have extensive automation capabilities, right? And the winning part was, like, I can put all those tasks on Outlook calendar. Now, when it comes to the Power Automate benefits, I don't need to tell all the community, like, you guys are like, we all live in this easy, simple, mostly free, like that's with a bunch of stars which comes in at the end, like, in the free part. But, it's easy and, like, it's reliable. We can make it work. Now, which basically in the beginning, I mentioned like two use cases, right? Like one is the shared mailbox. And second, we didn't want to have, and there is scheduled tasks at the end of the month, quarter, or the year. Like right now, they are into Q4 and also the yearly reporting works. So they have a lot of tasks. So all of them we need to combine. Like, and Planner allows us to combine. So that's where we came up with this as can we put all of them in a single view? And that's also a winning argument for towards Planner. Now, with that, we looked at Monday. Monday has this awesome feature. I'm not advertising Monday here, but awesome feature called templates. Planner does not. So how do we replicate that? Fortunately, we found something like some other volunteer, like somebody posted an article about this, like how to create templates from an Excel data, similar to Monday in Planner. So that's where, like, we came up saying, like, okay, follow that article, create a list, and set up these templates. Obviously, we extended that, and I'm going to show you how we did that as well. Okay. Here, at the beginning of the quarter, the manager goes in and triggers a flow saying, like, and now it's a quarter end flow. It has like over 150 tasks they need to do for the quarter end. So it goes and creates all of them at one shot and assigns it to the proper team member, which actually results in so that they can plan accordingly how much what they want to do on a given day. Like, do they want to attend meetings, or like, hey, I'm too busy, I can't attend, like, and they can give a justification because it's now showing up on their calendars. I want to switch to a different screen. Okay, so here is what we did. When I say about the template, we created a list. The original article was, which we found was for Excel. Then we defined saying, like, okay, we can do this in SharePoint, which is also part of Teams. So we created a list, simple list, and posted all these task templates. So you have the description, you have the title, and who to assign to. This is easy to manage in SharePoint, right? And what are all the tasks? So you can go through, and we have this event, which is basically we can what type of task this is. It's a quarter end task versus uh, versus year end tasks. We do have some of the monthly and other things, but you got the gist of it. Like we can now filter by each of the tasks, and we can maintain a single list so that which we can drive off. And every time, like in the next quarter, like if they wanted to for a going forward, like in it's assigned to a different team member, all you have to do is just change the person here. And next time you run this template, like you're going to get you're going to get like assigned to the new people. Now also the due dates, like when the beginning of a particular start date, like we can calculate the due date and assign these tasks as well, so that it is very clear that like how much workload each person has. Now once we created this, and then we have that's then we have then we have another list. One discussion we had was like, should we automatically create those templated tasks on a given day versus can somebody create it? So we at the end we decided going for like somebody manually triggering off that task. It creates the whole set of tasks for the that quarter at one shot, but at the end it's easier for somebody to have control over how when they want to create those tasks, because it's the first time we are doing, we don't know what is the right way to do it, but rather like this only takes you like 30 seconds to trigger a task. So I would rather have this manually triggered. So you can see here, like we triggered a year-end task set, and also we have a quarter-end task set. Now that resulted in, once we trigger that, it creates a entire uh, planner assignments. See here, like we have the buckets, these customer service buckets. Now we have the entire task set created here. So all these like tasks are created in one trigger. Like somebody just said like okay, create all my quadrant tasks. It actually went and created the whole set of tasks and assigned to the proper person. Now we can define by like this is one of the good things about the planner is like you can look at it like in different ways, and also you can filter, a manager can filter, say like okay, what is assigned to what is on Atul's plate or like my plate. You can see it very clearly, right? This is the kind of the benefit we are seeing. So on top of it, when we are but like think about it, like we are replicating this templating, like a task templating feature here, which is an incredible capability by using like a simple workflow in Power Automate. So I want to show a little bit, and without going into too much details here, I would like to show how we built this. Very simple. Here we have the trigger with the list, and we have the main like template list, and we are filtering it with what we selected here. So if I want to go back here, we triggered it for quadrant. It picks up, applies the filter simply, equals, nothing complicated here, and a bunch of variables typical for developers to create. And then you identify the right bucket, because this quadrant, when we are looking at here quadrant and year end, those are also the buckets which we are placing in. So we look up the bucket, a simple loop to like, go through the loop and figure out like what is the right bucket matching that criteria. And you go in and create all the tasks very fast, takes a couple of minutes. in our task set, we had a total of 400 tasks across in all of them. And a quarter end will trigger about 125 tasks in that. So a quarter end, when we trigger a quarter end task template, it creates 125 tasks across 70 members. And everybody was excited to see all of their tasks with their due dates on their proper due dates on their calendar. One thing here is you create a task and you can't populate the details of the task. So we just need to work with that. It's a simple downside, not a big deal. But overall, if you go through the entire workflow, 15 blocks, it took a couple of hours to actually design it and implement it. But it gave so much lift to us that we couldn't believe that we couldn't, when we started the discussion, we couldn't even believe that we can actually do this. So this is one of kind of the big achievement, and for the client, it was okay, now I can see what are the tasks on each of their plates, and I can make a decision whether I should call somebody to a meeting, or they just got already overloaded for 12 hours today. So I would rather postpone that meeting to some time later. So that was the key outcome, and people were ecstatic. Even the folks who were looking at, they're what are their tasks on their plate? Now they don't need to keep track of Excel. More importantly, their manager knows that what they are working on. So that's pretty much how it looked from from a scheduled task perspective. Now we switch to, on a day-to-day basis, there are a lot of requests coming from customers. These customers are high net worth individuals. We're talking about people investing millions of dollars with them, right? Let me switch my screen again, please. So we were here. So in a high level, this is the flow which we used for, these are the steps which we used for creating the templated tasks. Now, when a request comes in from the via an email to a shared mailbox or their mailbox, we're basically creating a task for them. More so that it's not for their they know what they have to respond to, but it is more so for their manager to know that I'm working on this request. So it basically creates a task, and we also formatted and created the flow in such a way that it actually detects that there is a follow-up to that email, which actually detects that we created a task based on this in the same conversation. So instead of creating a new task, it actually goes and updates the existing task, saying we got a follow-up. Now, if we get 2 follow-ups, our logic is if you get 2 follow-ups, then bump that priority of the task to high, and also send a message to the manager saying we got 2 follow-ups and we don't have an update on this. So manager can also now it gets can be escalated. Now the challenge was how do we do that, right? So we created a simple list, and when we created the task, we maintained a dictionary kind of a setup between a conversation ID of the email chain and the task ID. So when the next email comes in, it looks which conversation, looks against the conversation ID and goes and updates the task related to that. Now, one of the other aspects which we were careful about is we don't want to add additional work to the team members. So what happens if there is a task and the person goes in, a finance person goes into the shared mailbox, they know that there is a task, which is because it's assigned to them, and replies to an email. The task is still in not started state. That's not good because he actually worked on it. Now, he might be so busy that he's not coming to the task set and finding the task and saying like, I'm working on it. So we created another flow when somebody replies to an email, go and mark that, promote that task to in progress and assign to the person who replied. So that worked out very well. So the same logic, go to the conversation ID, see which task was associated with that conversation, and update that task. Now, this saved a lot of effort because now the person knows what emails they responded to, and they don't need to immediately act on the task side of it. At the end of the day, they can, or next day morning, like, and they can actually look at saying like, okay, these I responded yesterday, I can go and check. Or like, sometimes you are basically waiting for the confirmation from the customer saying like their issue is resolved. So wait for that and go and close those tasks. Those are like big things because this eliminated the need for somebody to go and diligently go and check them because that's not going to happen. When they're like working for 16 hours on a quadrant task set, like they're not going to go. We know that for sure that they're not going to go and work on the task side of it. Now, one of the challenges which we also faced was how do we do the deployment? The easiest way is make some of the other team members as co-owners, deploy once, and like in every time you make a change, export it as a zip file and put it in Git so that things are versioned properly. By the way, Microsoft Flow itself, like Power Automate interface itself versions it. Don't know like how long they are going to keep those versions for, but I can confidently go back like 10 versions behind. But it's always good to have like some backups. It also helps to migrate like from migrate to different environments like if we need to. So another challenge we had was reporting. The default reports, which I showed you, like there's a bunch of charts within the planner, which are good. Like it gives you trend lines of like how long like, things are. It gives you some workload stats, and also it gives you like how many tasks pending and like how many are being closed on a daily basis. That's good, but like if you want to have actual more analytics around it, neither Microsoft Power Automate nor nor Teams Planner makes it easy. So initially, for the initial few runs, like we actually use the Excel export option. It's pretty fantastic that like you can export the entire set like with the history into Excel, and you can create a simple simple pivot table and look at the stats. But for an enterprise reporting level, like you can't ask a CFO to go and say like do all these steps or like ask somebody to create more work, right? So we created a small small utility and schedule it on a daily basis to export to the blob storage. From there, like we can pick it up from Power BI and report against that. That we did it after like about a month, and it came out good. But it is additional work, but it is worth actually doing that. There is for the managing flows, we have two equivalents, right? So one is on a smaller companies like Power Automate would cut it. That means the only downside of the Power Automate is it works on the user space. And if we try to explain that to some of the larger enterprise customers, like it's okay to have in the user space, their primary concern was, okay, what if that user leaves? Now we delete that user account and you lose the flow. Even if you have co-owners, you don't get the visibility to their enterprise or infrastructure guys who manage things on a larger scale, any visibility into how many flows they are actually working through. And their bigger concern is, if they have 1,000 people, how do we manage flows created by each of those 1,000 people, or like if you're deploying within a year, like imagine like if half of the people are creating custom automations, there would be at least 10,000 flows on an average. How do we manage? The solution for the larger enterprises seems to be to logic apps. You can create, play around with the Power Automate flows, export it and import it to logic apps, where the infrastructure folks or the app dev infrastructure can manage at at scale, like at the enterprise level. That is also another option. We have implemented logic apps like similar model Power Automate and logic apps on different ones, different scenarios. Not for this, but another benefit of logic apps is like now you're opening up your capabilities to like entire Azure or like outside, like in Power Logic Apps has more connectors than Power Automate. Some of them, like you can connect to SQL Server and things, so which Power Automate requires a special license. That's also added benefit of Logic Apps if you want to go through that. And the most important benefit of Logic Apps over Power Automate is that like it runs on a service account, not on a user account. That means you can run it on a user account, but you can also run it as a service account. So it's independent of any specific user, or you're eliminating that key man risk. That's one thing to consider about. Feedback from users. One thing is like, no noise is a good thing. That's what our outcome ended out to be, because at the end, like, it fitted into their natural flow, and it was easy because it's planner is part of like what they see is planner, and it is synced to their calendars. So it's naturally fitting into their workflows, even though they have to go one click into planner and they have to check off the task. But that is the most simplest solution we could provide, or they could even imagine. When we try to explain, like, we simulated that with additional trials of Monday or Zendesk, it was actually a lot more work than Planner from the end user standpoint. So at the end, concerns were concerns were non-existent. We worked around, and then we started realizing that this tool, instead of as thinking of it as a fully baked solution, think of it as any typical Microsoft solution. Will give you a platform with a lot of API capabilities, integrations, automation capabilities, and you make it work, rather than thinking of it as a fully blown solution for your purpose. If you think that way, and if you explain the client that way, client won't get frustrated. You are not hitting any roadblocks. Rather, you're thinking it of, okay, I have this basic tool where I don't need to create a user interface. It gives you the basic workflow and the usability, which was a well-researched, like they spent millions of dollars in developing this, making it very simple to use. And now as a consultants, like we go in, consultants or developers, we go in and look at it as like, okay, that user interface is amazing. And everything, all the workflows and the behind the scenes stuff, which users are not going to look at. Like, for example, nobody's going to look at your code. Rather, their experience is based on like how good the tool is working. So that is well developed in the front end is well developed, and you can use that to your advantage to build all the workflows and makes your clients' lives easier. And you can, they'll appreciate you, and that's what the takeaway for us. And this is one of the very successful implementations we did, like, and there's absolutely no noise, which was amazing, which we didn't get from any other implementations. And this was we considered it as one of our like the best implementation we did. And the client appreciated that too. And that's obviously it boils down to the client appreciation. With that, I want to stop, and we have about 15 minutes of Q&A time. And I'm open for questions. Raz, Kiara.
Okay, I think we're opening up to questions now. So if people want to type any in the chat, we can get those answered for you. Okay, from Christopher, do you find in your more complicated implementations that you prefer Logic Apps over Power Automate?
It's not the complicated implementation, because the capabilities, workflow capabilities, the logic capabilities are identical. If not, Logic Apps is one version behind Power Automate. And so that puts us into, it's not the complexity of the logic, but integration options. As I said, I could do a trigger, like you wanted to do a lift of like we have done like an ADF, like an Azure Data Factory, where like to move large amounts of data triggered by Power Automate flow. There, like putting it in Logic Apps makes more sense. And it also has more connectors, which are normally covered under the premium only for the Power Automate, whereas the Logic Apps, it comes in standard. And because it's a pay per use, or like in its provision, like it's a licensing is different. Logic Apps more sense if you're working on Azure. But if you're like, if you're not touching Azure, or like if you're working within the capabilities of Dynamics or Microsoft Office itself, I think it's preferred to keep it in Power Automate.
Excellent. Thank you, Bhuvan. Okay, so Sunny asks, can you please expand on the use of Logic Apps within the enterprise?
So use of Logic Apps, they're identical tools, more or less, like, they're compatible. You can create, think of it as Power Automate as running it as a developer tool, like you can create your own, and then you can export and import it into Logic Apps. But Logic Apps, that environment is owned by your cloud administration or the cloud engineers, whereas Power Automate is owned by Office 365 administration. So who is going to own the logic at the end, like, who is going to carry that burden towards like managing that, is what defines Logic Apps versus Power Automate. It's the ownership. And as I said, like another one is about the capabilities. Like if you want to integrate or like, work with any of the additional extend the capabilities into Azure, then Logic Apps makes more sense.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Pernille asks, how do you debug, troubleshoot in case something isn't working?
That's one thing we were extremely happy about, because if you go in to your run, I could actually share that, share my screen on that.
Excellent.
So there is my flows. Okay. So here, this is failed versus this is succeeded. To my surprise, when I first started working on Power Automate, this was one of the excellent features I've seen. So you can actually see, like in the debug, like while you're running as a test mode, it shows you live animations of like where you are. And what is happening. And also I could go in and see what's wrong with this, right? So it's pretty easy. It's very visual and it's pretty easy. Messages are quite surprising, and a Microsoft environment are very descriptive. So again, only owners can see this. Owners of the flow can see this. I think that's good enough, like any other enterprise tool or any other tool, as a matter of fact. So it's pretty good. Like, all you have to do is like go into my flows and look at like, your run history. This saves for the last 28 days. And you can go in and see like, how did it work? Like, although sometimes it might say succeeded, it's not giving you expected results. You can always go in and see, go in and see like, what's happening. And for loops, like, this is a little confusing, but like, you have 14 times this loop ran. You can go one by one and see, see one by one, or like, you have an option of go to the next failed ones. And you can see like, what happened inside each of the blocks, which is pretty good, like, which is on par with like, what you expect from a proper development tool, like in Visual Studio or like any of the log monitoring tools.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so one here from Atref. When is a plugin more suitable than a workflow?
Plugin, I'm assuming here, plugin when you're talking about like an extension for Teams or Office 365. If that is the case, we had a situation like, where a workflow didn't make sense, like, for their personal, which I didn't cover much, is when you have a personal mailbox, the connections gets a little tricky, how you manage the connections. If you have like 50 employees in a team and like you want to monitor all of theirs, and your connections are individual to individual mailboxes. At that time, your plugin, your workflow, Power Automate flow, a workflow from a Power Automate gets a little tricky because now you have to manage a large number of connections. You can dynamically switch, but it makes it more sense to build an Outlook extension or a Teams extension and just add it, associate with Outlook and deploy it to them, and they can manage. And moreover, on top of it, you don't want to also monitor all the mails coming into their private mailbox, right? So that also gives you more control for people, like, which email they can mark it as a task, as an investor request, as something like or their personal or private emails, which you don't want to show it to everybody. That's where like, your plugin or extension makes sense.
Thank you very much for getting a lot of questions coming through. Sorry if we can't get to them all. And also sorry if I mispronounce anyone's name, because I know that can be annoying. Okay, so Ranjan asks, hi Bhuvan, it would be great if you could show a demo run of the flow.
Demo run, unfortunately, we can't because one, it takes some time, but it's also I can show you, like, I actually showed you can watch in the recording, like, and actually showed like how the flow is created, and I can post in a layout of the flow. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so Jawira asks, how do you work on environments to mitigate flows in a different environment?
Mitigate or migrate?
Migrate, yes, sorry.
Okay. It's easy. You can export on Flow has this nice export function. You can export into one of the two formats. As I said, like a Logic Apps has a slightly, it's one version behind, so it does not fully support solution model. So migration, Power Automate supports two models. One is export and import, where you can export a zip file or if you want to migrate to a different environment of Power Automate, if you can export it as a JSON if you want to import it as into Logic Apps. Now, It also supports another model called solutions, where you can package it along with other, like in a bunch of flows, you can package it as a single solution, and which fully supports Azure DevOps as their DevOps model. So you can use a DevOps model using Azure DevOps pipelines to migrate between. If you're using solution model, you can use it. You can do an export the solution and import back, and also you can work with Azure DevOps or GitHub and use those pipelines to enable CI/CD between multiple environments.
Thank you very much. Okay, Syed asks how to deploy Power Automate in a solution with a generalized environmental connection.
That's a little tricky because the connections are specific to individual environments. Now, the solution itself, I want to there is a small star or the disclaimer on the solution model. If you don't have Power Apps licenses, it seems that solutions using solution model is little tricky. But once you establish a connection, like, you have to, like any other DevOps models, each environment, you need to set up the connections and your ID stays there. But when you export and import into the other environment, they seem to persist. So you don't need to reconfigure. So you just go in and select update instead of create new flow. And that would take care of most of it. You still need to verify when you import the solution on the other side anyway.
Okay, thank you. Where are we? Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so Adama asks, can you deploy also using pipelines?
Yes, but there are slightly different licensing requirements on the Power Platform licensing requirements. So you can only use pipelines if you are using solution model. So by default, if you are using Office 365 and you're not using CDS, which is Common Data Service or Dataverse these days, it gets a little tricky to go through the solution model to use pipelines. So you have to be, you just need to be aware of that. But yes, you can, and Microsoft recently published Azure DevOps extension to enable, allow the flows in the solution or to be actually integrated with Azure DevOps.
Thank you very much. Okay, Saeed asks, when you deploy flows, the connection gets lost and requires a new connection in another environment. Is there a way to point to a service account so it doesn't break on deployment?
I have not. We couldn't figure that out in Power Automate or in the Power Automate. In Logic Apps, yes, but we couldn't do that in Power Automate. We were able to do that like using if the first flow you import can retain the IDs, which sometimes does, and half of the times it won't. It can retain the connections because it goes by the IDs. But half of the times you have to basically reconfigure the connection, but rest everything remains actually intact when you're importing and exporting and importing.
Okay, thank you very much. Syed's just asked now, how to differentiate what is more suitable, the workflow or the flow, if both can do that job?
I don't think they are replaceable. They are very different contexts. Workflow, we use that in terms within the SharePoint context, typically, or within the Dynamics context. Now, workflow only works against a record or like a table, either say it as a SharePoint list or a Dynamics table, right? Or the Dataverse table. Now, flow is independent of both. It can also work with those tables. Obviously, you need additional effort to put in to bind all the capabilities to get to the capabilities of the flow. But what flow allows you to do is, it opens up to connect between systems. So it is always depending on your scenario. Sometimes, like, putting a flow might takes a lot more effort, which is not required, like if you're only working on a table.
Okay.
So it's not a straightforward answer there. I know you have to define, and you have to figure that out, like, based on your specific circumstance.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any other questions? There's probably a couple I've missed. Oh, sorry, I just asked another one. Do you think flows is for devs only, or citizen develops can build flows as there are variables involved?
Flow is actually meant for citizen developers. So devs can use, obviously, any dev can be a citizen developer, right? Like, there are variables, like every tool, you will have some learning curve. It's no different than learning, like, macros, like back in the days, learning of macros, like, where the citizen developers can record and just go and update the macros. This is no different. One good thing about what Microsoft did recently is integrate the learn experience. So citizen developers can actually, spend a couple of hours and they can get pretty good at using the flow variables, and like they can get started. And variables are optional only under, like, little more complex scenarios. Most of the times you can get away with not using variables as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, I think we will ask one more question before we move on to our next speaker. So Govind asked, wait, hang on a second. Govind asks, can developers see the design and development of the code on the community or any link?
I didn't quite understand the question there.
Oh, sorry, no problem. Let's see if there's another one.
Oh, okay. So if you're basically thinking of, like, the community side, like in community edition kind of thing, yes. So you can sign up for Microsoft Flow and play around with it. Now, recently, I think Microsoft launched the developer program. So you can sign up for a developer, you get like a 90-day license for the Office 365 E5 suite, if I'm correct, if I understand correctly, and you don't need to pay for it. You can just sign up and start developing, if that's the community in that context means.
Okay, thank you very much, Bhuvan, and thank you so much for getting up so early and for your brilliant session. I think we're just about ready to move on to Mohammed's session next, so I'm just going to stop this recording now.
Thank you all.
Whilst you do that, Kira,
okay.
I just want to thank Bhuvan. I think it was a really impressive session to kick off the event. So once again, thank you, Bhuvan. You covered a lot of content right there. So I just want to thank you for your for kicking off the event with such a great session.
Thank you all. And looking forward to hear the other sessions.
Excellent, excellent. That was Bhuvan from Dallas. And thank you, Kira. That was really great. So yes, I think we've got 2 minutes left for our next session. So I think we're in a good position, Kira, to get Mohammed Mustajab to try and share his screen.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hopefully I'm audible.